Hello and welcome to the DIMP Digital Podcast. I'm your host Joe Appleyard. This is the first part of 3 special episodes where we will be discussing the greatest games of all time. Now it's a massive task and I've helicoptered in the best man for the job. He's been playing games since the 80s. He's making his second appearance on the DIMP Digital Podcast. Please welcome Pac-Man himself, Tom Adcock. Tom, how you doing, mate?
Hey mate, yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Let's quickly set the scene here for the guys at home. Now, as I mentioned when you was last on, me and you, we used to work together, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we didn't spend a lot of time doing work as such. We were mainly sitting there talking about films or talking about games, in fact, and often we'd go back and forth over what our favourite games were and what the greatest games of all time were. And we didn't really have much success with this because I think we both felt that it didn't seem fair to be judging, I don't know, a game like Grand Theft Auto 5 against, you know, an old classic like Golden Axe, for example. The transformation in the game development, the gap in technology, the change in gaming tastes and trends for us as well, and also the amount of money that's ploughed into these things these days just meant that, you know, trying to single out a single best game using today's standards wasn't a balanced way to do things. And we come up with a solution for this dilemma. What we're going to do is separate each console generation and give our top 3 games and honourable mentions individually. The console generations will be ring fenced off from one another and they're going to get their own time and their own focus, and I think this is going to portray a much fairer picture, and the games are only going to be compared against the competition at the time. We're not going to be evaluating the games by modern principles. We're going to be winding back the clock, talking about the games as they were intended to be, and reliving some of our memories, which now have stuck with us for, you know, nearly 2 decades coming up to this sort of time. We're going to start in the 3rd generation, so that's the Master System and NES, and we'll be finishing up in the 7th generation, which will be the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and of course the Nintendo Wii. Now, there's one stipulation we've enforced throughout the process, and it's the fact that we can actually only choose one game from each franchise. So, for example, if it comes to the PlayStation era and I pick FIFA 98, I then can't use FIFA 2013 for PlayStation 3. So this is going to ensure that it's going to be a variety of games being discussed, and it'll also uncover what our favourite games were for an entire series, which I think in itself creates an interesting dilemma and dynamic. Just to stress, this is only going to be active for our top 3 games. Honourable mentions will be a free-for-all, so we're going to be spilling out all sorts of games and probably doing multiple franchises in our honourable mentions. So there may be spoilers throughout this, depending on how deep we go into the game. So if you're concerned about any of that, switch off now. But as stated, we're going to be doing the console generation separately. And in this episode, we're going to cover off the 3rd generation. But we didn't think it was fair to exclude the old classic consoles or the home computers or the handhelds and even the PCs from this process. So before we get started with the 3rd generation, we're going to kick off with a sort of best of the rest. We won't be, you know, given a top 3 for each of these platforms. It's more likely going to be the highlights from separate sort of platforms and whatnot. Now, you mentioned when you first came on, Tom, and your first appearance here on the podcast, that you had a Lord Sugar sort of Amstrad as one of your first console memories. And on your best of the rest here, you've given me 3 games. I mean, I'll let you read them off, but, you know, in the Amstrad itself, what was it essentially? It was a home computer-based platform, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was designed for games primarily, but,
No.
You know, I don't know anyone who used it for anything else. You wouldn't want to sort of do any finance on that thing. So yeah, I think an old uncle just bought around an Amstrad with a bucket full of games, and some of the classics on that. I get mixed up which ones are on which thing, but I think I know I've got Auf Wiedersehen Monty down, which was classic sort of bit of British gaming.
British
I think
there's a lot of them were, I guess, at that time.
I think, yeah, there was because it would have been, wouldn't it? It's an Amstrad made in England. It probably didn't go outside of the country, and it's a big like home brewing scene, like for British developers, and they were like super small teams doing them. Yeah. And this was a little series, Monty the Mole. He would, in the first game, he had to escape jail, and in the sequel, far superior, in my opinion, he was collecting money around Europe to buy his own Greek island, Montus, and it was like a single screen
platformer.
Yeah. So you would like be in Italy, which would be the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You'd have to collect a series of matte pieces or gold or whatever. Then you'd move on to Gibraltar, which would be a big rock. It was all right. It was really good. Yeah, it was. Obviously, I was like really young at this time, so it's one of my like lasting memories of that, and it was the one I always used to fire up the most. So that's getting a definite mention.
Sure. Well, you got another one on here which has got another strange name, Chucky Egg.
Chucky Egg, yeah.
You've mentioned this a couple of times, sort of in our passing conversations and whatnot. I've never really delved in deep what Chucky Egg was. It just sounded like a ridiculous game, but I'm sure you've got some fond memories of it.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm going to have... I mean, I don't know, this is probably not true, but it was my first experience of like a boss character. Right. So you were a little fella collecting eggs. Sure. And quite like... Donkey Kong-esque, so you could drop through the screen, but there was like elevators and gaps to jump and things. And in the top left-hand corner was a big, super-sized chicken just sitting there chilling out. And you would get through like to the final level 10 or whatever, and then you would play through the levels again. But all of a sudden, the bird had become an in-game character. He was chasing you around the screen.
Yeah.
So I would say that's, like first Resident Evil 3 nemesis, but it was just a big chicken chasing you around. Yeah. So it made it really good, exciting. I think if you got around again, you'd get 2, and I assume it would go on indefinitely, but
I see. But you never got that far, is it?
6, mate. So yeah, that was like once around was enough.
That was enough to get through the game. I mean, the last one you've got on here for the Sugar Amstrad is the Treasure Island Dizzy. Now, I've got no clue what this is.
Mate, you're missing out. You can get these on your iPhone now. Dizzy, it's like it's more eggs. It's an egg with a boxing glove this time.
Hell.
Yeah, again, British made as far as I know. Adventure game, I guess, like some platforming elements in, but it was really good. So Treasure Island Dizzy, you washed up on Treasure Island essentially, and you had to try and get your way off, but there'll be all people to interact with, ridiculously cryptic clues. Like you'd have like, when you even with the internet, I reckon you'd struggle to complete it, but when you're like 8 and you've got 6 weeks summer, you would spend a good like portion of that trying to get through this game. Like interacting with like the locals, and they would want.
So you talk to them. You could talk to them. Was it?
You'd get
text based. Or was it like a point and click? How did it even work? How did you?
No, so you could move Dizzy around left and right, and he could jump. He'd done like a big super spin, and he could pretty much jump from any height, from what I remember. But like there'd be a dragon blocking your way, and then the dragon would have a thorn in his foot, and you'd have to work out like some sort of potion to get the thorn out. Things like this, but it was like. It gave you no clues at all, how you was meant to work some of this stuff out. I remember I got to this bit where you bought yourself a boat and you thought you could get off the island, but the boat had no bottom to it. So I think you had to end up getting loads of wood to actually make a boat that floats. It was ridiculous. And obviously, once you died, start again.
Yeah, no save game this time, is it? Nothing like that. You're absolutely up
pure endurance, mate. Yeah, just go and get yourself like a Ribena and try again, basically. Yeah.
So we got the old Commodore 16 as well. You got a couple of games in there. You got Icicle Works and Saboteur.
Fucking hell, yeah.
So Icicle Works, that sounds very simplistic. Again, not entirely sure what it is. What the hell is that? Is it a strategy game of some sort, or?
No, mate, don't be silly. Commodore 16, no strategy involved. I don't even have to explain it, mate. Single screen.
Yeah.
Like you probably get them on your phone now. You were this guy with a shovel, so any time you move a pixel, that would clear 1 pixel of snow away.
Right.
And then you'd have to collect puzzle pieces or whatever they were. I think it was like polar bears and penguins shapes. And then, but if you went too close to like a box holding an enemy, which you had to do to collect all the snow, you would then let him out and he would like power around after you.
Yeah.
But it was, again, I mean, I think the Commodore 16 was before the Amstrad, so I was really young here, and I remember really enjoying this one. No idea who made it. If anyone else played it.
Yeah. We was talking just off air about the Saboteur. You mentioned there was like two versions of it, like 2 cartridge based games.
Yeah.
How did that work? So what was the game to start with? You said you could turn it over and it's like a text based adventure?
Yeah, so I was a bit young really for any of these, but back then there was a whole bunch of, and I've seen them on like retro shows and magazines, like a real big deal. There were these like text-based adventures, a lot of them based around like The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, things like that, and there'd be certain like commands, smart commands that you I don't think the instructions would be too forthcoming with like how to do anything. So often you'd have to say go south, north, east or west rather than left, right. And it didn't tell you this. You just had to key something in until the character actually moved. Right. So this game was quite good, quite novel in that you put it inside it was like I think it was a cartridge, or it might have been a tape. I know it had the Commodore had a cartridge base at the back as well, so some of the games were on cartridge. Can't remember though. But one side of it was like an action game. Yeah. You were a saboteur going into a building. Don't know what kind of building. You had to plant a bomb on the bottom floor, make your way up, eventually get up to a helicopter waiting for you on the top.
Sure, just get out of ground floor, wouldn't you, and leave?
No, mate, closed. Blocked in, it's on shutdown. So, and I remember having pretty decent graphics for the time, and there's these little trains you had to get on to go between. How big the building was, I don't know. It had a train line in it. But it's decent. But then, the novel thing with that was flip it over, the actual tape or disc or whatever it was, and it had the same game, but as a text-based adventure.
That's good, that is.
So, it was pretty good, and I don't remember anything else being like that. And I remember kind of always wanting to be able to play those games, but just being too young. And we had one called Frankenstein, obviously based on the book, and you kind of, my brother-in-law used to play. I would have had this in, but I just didn't play. I just watched him. But you would like switch from perspective from like Dr. Frankenstein and then his monster, and I remember that being really, really good. But
good ideas there, certainly. I mean, they're limited by what they could do, but it's certainly some good imagination that's being used back in those days. I mean, the oldest console that I had the pleasure to play was the Atari 2600. Now, that was released well over a decade before I was even born, but for whatever reason, it was knocking about in the Appleyard household. And the only game I really have any sort of memory of was a game called Frostbite. Now, you controlled this little chap called, his name was like Frostbite Bailey, and the aim was to help him build an igloo without getting eaten by a polar bear, falling in the water, or running out of time, which would cause you to die from frostbite. So quite evil, really, when you think about what could possibly happen to Frostbite Bailey. But it played a lot like Frogger, where there was a top screen which was sort of not safe, but there was a top screen where you could stand. There was no water flowing. That's where your igloo was. But that's also where the polar bear would sort of be roaming up and down. And below you had a pond or a lake of some sort with moving pieces of ice, and you had to hop between each of them. And each time you land on a new piece of ice, it would build a block to your igloo. Eventually, when you do this enough times, the igloo completes, and you have to quickly jump back on the platform, run inside, and you go to the next level. But I never got close to beating that. But it's certainly one of the earliest game memories I have, is just getting that shit cartridge and putting it in the Atari 2600 and trying to get through the first few levels of Frostbite, which was near impossible for my sort of skill level.
See, I never really even played an Atari. They had those weird... The controllers were like telephones, weren't they? Like receivers. They were massive. Yeah, with like dials and stuff.
It's unbelievable how anyone thought that was a good idea or like a compatible way to play gaming. It's ridiculous, really. Home computer wise, I once again ended up with a system that was released before I was born, and that was the Commodore 64. Now, the main thing I remember about having the C64 was that all the palaver you had to go through just to get a game loaded up. So you had to put the tape in, enter a command, wait for it to load. Half the time it wouldn't bloody work. I mean, I used to go to school in a primary school, which was about 10 minutes away from my house, and I used to have home dinners, and I'd literally come out.
No, you're going to say.
Yeah, I'd come out. My mum would be waiting there. I'd run. She'd run, and she'd be like, "For God's sake!" And I'd run home, get in, get the C64 powered on, try to play a game, but usually by the time the game had booted up, after it had failed 3, 4, 5 times, it was time to go back to school. I don't think I ever successfully managed to get a decent session in on my lunches, but there's a couple of good games that I used to love playing. Paperboy, what a classic that is. I was quite lucky because I remember that we didn't have Paperboy originally, but my brother actually swapped it for another game which escapes my memories, but to this day it's probably the best deal he's ever pulled off. And I love the electrical soundtrack it had, and there's just this great mischief part of just chucking papers through people's windows that never gets old. Just sitting there doing that. And the aim of the game essentially was to just lob the Daily Sun to houses that were marked for delivery, whilst avoiding like angry neighbours, cars and dogs and other obstacles. And to complete the game, you had to get through the entire week without losing all your lives, and you have to keep one customer at least on your round. But I never got past Wednesday myself.
Just one customer, that's enough. That's a good job.
I think that was just enough. I think you started off with 10 or 11, and if you missed them on that round for a day, they were gone for good. You couldn't like get them back, so you had to keep the ones.
So they're your lives essentially.
Sure, yeah. But I think you had 2 or 3 lives where you could get knocked off your bike, and that was game over as well. But yeah, Wednesday.
There's that like BMX track at the end of the levels as well, wasn't there?
It was like an obstacle course, which was bloody hard. You could get bonus points though if you chucked your papers in the target, but it was a nightmare trying to get over the mountains, or not over the mountains, over the ramps and that, and you'd end up losing a life hitting the wall. Well, I would anyway. As I said, I was poor at that game. For 3 days I got maximum, but I think I did make a half decent paperboy when I hit the age of 11. So probably all that practice from playing that on the C64. Now another crackerjack on the C64 for me was international karate. So I was a massive fan of the Karate Kid. So this was right up my alley, to be honest. And even today, though, it's a pretty unique 1v1 fighting game, because rather than having a life bar that you grind down and through combos and striking, it's a point-based system where one clean hit would give you a point or half a point. So if you punched them once, that's it. That could win you the game if you got.
So literally like Olympic karate, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly the same rule. So one clean blow, and it's a very different take on what a typical sort of beat 'em up is, because if you play something like Street Fighter, you're obviously grinding down and getting towards the life bar. This was a lot more, a lot more precise yet to be. And you had to be a bit more on your game.
Yeah, I suppose you're going to be really cagey, aren't you? Just go for that
one sort of, you could do like jump kicks and that, but that would expose you to just getting uppercutted or anything like that. It was very difficult. There was no actual ending to the game as far as I know. You just kept moving up belt rank until you reached black, and then you could just keep moving up levels after that. You just continue until you get bored, I guess. There was these weird sort of bonus rounds as well, just that broke up the fighting, where there's like a mini game where you could have to break a stack of bricks with your head or dodge knives and spears. Not really sure why they're in there, but I guess it broke up the gameplay a little bit. The controls were solid though, and they still are solid. It's got a killer soundtrack as well that really tops it off. So International Karate and Paperboy were definitely the classics from the C64, despite the wretched sort of start-up period that used to really get on my nerves. The last home computer I had was the classic Amiga 500. Par for the course again with me. I mean, it was released before I was born, but it was a big upgrade on the C64 and was far, far easier to use. No messing around with the loading of the tapes, just floppy disks in and done. I had this a bit out of sync though, because I actually think I had this after I'd had my Mega Drive. So it's probably just before the
That's
PlayStation.
ludicrous.
Yeah, it's before the PlayStation was released, I think. So it's a good few months before. It might have even been during the PlayStation before I could afford it. But I had this as like a stopgap.
Who was playing Amigas when the PlayStation was knocking about? That's ridiculous.
That is what I had. Because I remember just going around my cousin's once.
The Mega Drive and that, I guess, would be about right, I think.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the games were released in like the early 90s. So the Mega Drive was probably... I passed it as well, but it's definitely after the Mega Drive because it was in my room, and I think that was one of the benefits I had, because I went around my cousins and played it all night. They were looking to cash in on it anyway for whatever reason. They obviously saw my interest. As soon as they sort of I mentioned that to my dad, that was it. 50 quid, done, birthday present. Stack of games that come with it. It must have been about 30 odd. Some were dire, but as usual, there's a few gems that shone through. But yeah, I think that was the first one I had in my room, so I didn't have to go downstairs and play it, on the telly, and if they wanted to watch EastEnders or whatever was playing on at the time, then I would have to sort of wait. This was in my room, and I could just sit up there and just rot away for as long as I wanted, and that was what really appealed to me. Cannon Fodder for me had such a special place in my heart. It was developed by Sensible Software, and they were actually founded just up the road in Chelmsford, so I don't know if you knew that.
No.
That definitely upgrades them, sort of Essex boys, so they get an upgrade on that. But it had an awesome intro. It's very, very film-like, and that gets me on board immediately. And it's an ironic look at the way war is, and it's really an anti-war game. The there's the soundtrack that you have and the lobby when you're waiting for your soldiers is just burnt into my brain. I can't get that sound out of my head. It's still there today. I flicked on a YouTube channel the other day and I was like, I just remember this like note for note. It's mental. That's never going to go. But it was a gameplay. The gameplay was military based and it was a mix between strategy and sort of action, I guess. It's a top-down view, and you could control a squad of up to 5 troops, and you navigate using point-and-click mechanic with the mouse, and I think mouse button 1 fired. 1 bullet kills, so if 1 bullet hit an enemy, that was it, they were wiped out. But also, it was the same for your squad, so they were very fragile. 1 bullet, and you'd lose one of your little men.
So what was the mission then? Like, did you have to just kill off everyone on the screen? Or
yeah, so essentially, there was lots of missions, but usually it was kill all the enemies in the area, or it might be destroy one of like their spawn camps. So they used to spawn out of these little huts, so you might have to destroy them as well, destroy certain objectives on the maps. But you could enter jeeps, you could enter helicopters, throw grenade, fire rocket launchers. There's loads of different things to do. Certain parts of the levels are actually quite dangerous, and what you could do, which was quite interesting, was split your team up into smaller sort of 2 or 3 man squads. So if you didn't want to risk a whole team going in to destroy this certain artifact or whatever, you didn't have to. Now you'd probably question why you would bother doing this, but one was that you only had a limited number of recruits to get through the entire game. They would sort of tick over and you'd add more to them, but you could run out and cause a game over, which would be a complete nightmare. But what really used to stick with me was that each soldier had an individual name, and you become quite attached and fond of certain soldiers during your campaign. So if you get through 4 missions with them, you sort of have this little bond with them, especially like the first 2, which were called Jules and Jops. I still remember their name to this day, and it was really tragic when eventually these 2 would always die. You'd never get them through the whole game, and it was just always a bit of a tragedy when one of your favourite soldiers were put down, and you'd sort of sometimes I'd hold them back from certain situations so they didn't get killed, but eventually they'd die no matter how hard I tried. It's not only that though; they used to improve as they got more kills, so their firepower would increase, and they become more handy when you encounter tougher missions. But it's a great little.
Was it like Lemmings? Like did each character have different skills, or was everyone the same?
Nah, they're all bog standard, just machine gun fire, but they, as you got more kills, they would increase the fire rate or their throw distance for grenades. But like I said, for me, it was more just this attachment you would have with certain names or certain sort of squad members, and it would when they were dead, it would show their sort of tombstone, the lobby screen afterwards. So you'd always be reminded of their little death there, and it had them like on a little rankings leaderboard as heroes, and they were marked with their kills and whatnot. It's very basic, but it certainly used to hit home to me, even at that level. I just didn't want these people to die. But it's brilliant stuff from Sensible Software. It's a true gem. And another gem from these guys was Sensible World of Soccer, which I know you had on your list as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had the 1994 edition, and I'm not sure. I know there was like a yearly instalment sort of that came up, but what struck me was that with Sensible World of Soccer in particular, from 1994 onwards, it had nearly every team across the entire globe, didn't it? It had like something like 1,500 teams, and there was like 28,000 players, which is mental when you think about it.
Yeah, I think it had everything on there. I guess because it was mainly just text, and then that same football pitch, regardless, is probably not too much of a drain.
Just a colour change.
Yeah, exactly. But it was so clever the way they done it and got everything in. Because as a football fan, that's exactly what you want. You want the choice of everything and great gameplay, and they just nailed it both. There was I know some people obviously like their Champmans, and I think Kickoff was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I think once you found that, you were just laughing. It was absolute time killer. Yeah,
because there was like a career mode as well. That was, I think it was 20 years, where you could either play as the team like you would Stanley, or you could even be a coach, couldn't you? You could coach the team and just watch the game unfold.
Coach, player or player manager. I think
that's it. Yeah,
player manager was the main event, really.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that struck me was that there's actually a transfer market there as well in this career mode. So you could move clubs. You could give up your club and go and move somewhere else, and you could actually manage the national team as well.
Yeah, that's all in there.
It's all in there, and it's that was something that was missing for a long time in football games, just having that flexibility to move around clubs. Normally you're just a one-man club and you were stuck there, but the gameplay was top-down, wasn't it? So it's one button for passing, I think it's one button for everything, wasn't it? Just one button for passing.
Yeah, it was very clever, wasn't it? It was like if you held the button longer, you'd obviously do a longer pass or a harder shot, and you could, by the same mechanics, do like dive headers and
Yeah.
I don't think you could do an overhead kick, but yeah, it was really good, real sort of fast. It was ludicrous, like dynamic physics and stuff, but
yeah, because they had that after touch mechanic where
you
could
could bend
banana
it.
shot the ball. It was just you could score some absolute belters, but they were always massive banana shots. But it was by no means a realistic take on football the way it played, but it was just bloody entertaining, wasn't it? Just to sit there and play. As a football fan, like you said, that was perfect.
Yeah, it was the perfect blend between like simplicity of the game, obviously, but then the depth of the management side. But they didn't go. Some of these ones now are crazy in depth, aren't they? Like deal with the media, deal with the fans, have a girlfriend, everything.
Yeah,
that was just. Here's your player, buy him. What does he want to earn a week or whatever? And away he goes. It used to always annoy me though, because they used to always drop in price. Nothing you could do with like an expensive player would keep their.
Not even scoring 50 goals, it just dropped, just lost their value like a car.
Yeah, a couple of million down at the end of the season, livid. And then, like, as you said, if you got another job, I used to always sell all my players, all the top ones, to my new club at a bargain basement price. And so they were all waiting for me back at full value. When I went over there, I was like, yeah, sort of good tactic.
That is good tactic. The last one for the Amiga 500 is something that I played. I never got past the first level, but it was called Flashback. And the main thing I remember from that is the sort of cinematic open of those guys chasing you down a corridor of some sort. So the guy comes out, he gets in a spacecraft, they get in another one, they shoot you down, you crash land in some sort of jungle area. But you played this through to completion, didn't you, Flashback?
Yeah, it's amazing. To be fair, it came very close to getting into one of my top threes for in the Super Nintendo era.
Was it knocking about then, was it?
Yeah, I think it was cross-platform for it would have been on Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, probably Atari ST, Amiga 500.
Yeah.
Probably a few more. But yeah, it was brilliant. It was kind of like a spiritual successor to a game called Another World.
Right.
But you'd love it. I mean, I don't think it is on any of the... It might be on Android now, because Another World is, for sure.
Yeah, I did play it, but I was just so poor at games, I couldn't get past the first bit. I mean, the only way I could progress was to glitch through the walls. I found that if I ran and then quickly turned back, I'd get through locked doors. But obviously, I'd then not get the items I needed for the next part, and I'd never get as far as probably about 4 screens before dying. It was intriguing, but I was just at a skill level where I couldn't.
Yeah, it's a shame you played it young, because it has got an amazing storyline. Like, you lose your memory, you kind of get that back fairly soon on in the game. It's kind of like, I guess, if you don't know what we're talking about, a bit like Prince of Persia-esque. It's
quite, the animation was really fluid, wasn't it? That's really what struck me.
Smooth, realistic, but 2D.
Yeah.
And then it was very puzzle-based, and it's quite difficult. And then there would be action segments. There was an alien race that had integrated themselves with the Earth, but we didn't know about it. And it was kind of like They Live by the John Carpenter, the movie. So I think you got a pair of sunglasses and you could see the aliens. Right. And you ended up having to go on a game show to win some money to get on a spaceship to go up to the aliens planet. It was for that time, it was a crazy, good script and story.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I really like that.
Yeah, it's just it's a shame that like you said, I played it too young, so I was never good enough to get through it. But that for me draws to a close sort of the home consoles and the old consoles as such. PC wise, I'm just going to give a few mentions to a couple of games that deserve a shout out before getting involved with the big guns. So The Sims, and in particular The Sims 2. I love the entire series, but The Sims 2 is the standout edition. I spent most of my time on this cracking game, cracking series. Command & Conquer Red Alert 1 and 2, and again it's the sequel that gets the nod from me. I bloody loved Red Alert 2, whether it was the campaign or online against other humans, or even online cooperatively, because you could do comp stomp, which is you and another person versus about 3 or 4 hardest AI difficulty. Awesome game. And I ought to mention Quake, really, because my first experience with a first-person shooter was Quake, and I have lots of fond memories of going around my mate Stubbs' house and us just sitting there shitting ourselves playing that game. But it's a classic and it definitely deserves a mention. Final shout-out goes to a little-known game called Virtuous School. Now, I don't think many people would have heard of this, but it was
I've never heard of that. What's that?
It's a text adventure game, and you take the role of a new kid, or kid in a new neighbourhood, essentially. He's just moved there, and you go through his first day at school. it's a text adventure, and you work your way through different scenarios, making choices and dialogue choices and whatnot. And it had all these massive different branching paths and different variables depending on what you had said to someone and what choice you had chosen in a certain scenario. I mean, you can end up committing suicide at the end of it. You can get arrested, and you can even get laid by the end of the day. There were so many different sort of endings to it. It's fantastic for what it was, and it's the first game that I played where I was actually given the freedom to make choices and affect the outcome. And still to this day, that really resonates with me. So you get a quick win from me if you let me impact the story and change the direction of a game's narrative. That's a quick win, and that was the first experience I had of it. So Virtua School gets some mentions, but in terms of the big guns, I mean, Counter-Strike was a big one for me. When this sort of powered out, it was all the rage. The boom of the internet cafes came along because I was at home with 56k dial-up. So to play against others, I had to go to an internet cafe, but I would happily spend 5, 6, 7 hours in there some days just playing CS, really. And it's mental. I did used to download like a bot program so I could play at home against the computer, but it was never the same. You sort of could learn their tactics, but in my opinion, CS laid the bare bones for what multiplayer first-person shooters is these days, and it has to get a mention, really. And it's actually based, Counter-Strike was actually a mod of Half-Life, which brings me on to another classic. Now, Half-Life was a single-player game, but the narrative, presentation and fantastic gameplay, which is probably gone on to influence many first-person shooters in the way they were designed at the time, and probably nowadays. It's a special game, and I think many people can even go back and break it down that the history of first person shooters, there's like a pre-Half-Life era and then a post-Half-Life era. That's the sort of impact that it had at the time, and it's just great. There's some fantastic scripted sequences in it. The game never breaks away from the eyes of Gordon Freeman. You're always in control of him. It's got some light puzzle solving thrown in there to mix and spice things up. The enemies are quite good as well. You've got either little military soldiers or aliens known as like Zen. They come from the world of Zen, and I completed it back in the day using God mode, so massive cheat again. That's sort of my forte when I was younger.
What is God mode?
I think you could spring up the I can't remember what it's called now. That's how long ago since I've played a proper PC game, but you could bring up like a little dashboard and type in like a command. You could type in God, I think it was, and it would basically just gives you infinite life, so you couldn't die. So there was no way to lose unless you fell down a gap you shouldn't have and should have died from. So massive cheating to get through it. But I actually played it, I think it must have been a year and a half ago maybe. Went through it without cheating, and it's still a terrific game. And it went on to spawn Half-Life 2, which got universal acclaim as well. So both of those in the series, if I had to pick one, it would be Half-Life, just because it was the original. But Half-Life 2 certainly changed it again and come up with some fantastic new ideas. But those two games in particular, Half-Life 1 and 2, were produced by Valve, and they come up with another cracking game and another series in Portal 1 and 2. You've been playing through Portal lately, haven't you? You've just been having a quick go. Is it Portal 2 you've got?
Portal 2. We're just going through, me and my flatmate are going through like a backlog of games, and he happened to have Portal 2 sitting there.
Yeah.
He had never played it, so yeah, we got onto that, and it's what we're playing at the moment. Very, very, very good game.
Yeah, it's a puzzle-based games, first person, but they're very original, and you're essentially stuck in this facility, and you have to go through a series of tests where you use your portal gun, which I'm not going to explain how the portal gun works because it's too complicated. I can't find a way to explain the concept of the portal gun. You have to sort of see it to understand how it works. But Portal 1 was good. You're playing through Portal 2, which in my opinion totally expands, and everything that's good about Portal 1 makes it bigger, makes it better, throws in Stephen Merchant as a character, and it's just a complete joy to play from start to finish. And I'm sure you're going to have some great times up with that as you finish that off, but that's got to definitely get a mention in there. Last PC game, and then I will be quiet about the PC games. It was a game called Mafia, set in the 1930s. It's like had a classic sort of gangster movie feel to it. It's a third-person action game set within a big open world, and it gives you the look and the feel of, say, like a Goodfellas or The Godfather. It's got terrific storytelling throughout. The mechanics are solid, superb missions, and it's rooted in realism and in its serious tone. So it's sort of like a different take on what GTA 3 was at the time. But it does this very well. So it does the serious tone very well. And I think if you go down that route, you've got to get it right. And the guys at Illusion Software nailed it for this. It had just great little small details in there. Like, there's a working tram system that you could get on board to get around the city. There's several interior environments that you could wander into and look around. You could even fill up your car with petrol It's brilliant, and I think you can even run out of petrol. It's brilliant. I mean, you'd have to drive around for ages to do it, but the detail was there. It was ported over to PlayStation, but they did such a horrible, dreadful job that it messed it up really. So if you want to pick this game up, make sure you get it on PC. It's definitely a superior version, and it's an absolute blockbuster of a game. Last up on this sort of best of the rest is our handhelds. Now, you've got the classic one, haven't you? Tetris.
Yeah, of course.
It's just I don't know. It's just it's first of its kind, and it's just, even to this day, I see people playing it on the tube and whatever on the mobile. They're still playing it. Tetris,
Snake's the other one, I guess. You'll always get on the mobiles, won't you? It's funny, like they're the ones that people want to play just for a quick. I suppose that's the point. Yeah. It's just 10 minutes and you're done, basically, aren't you? And then you just go again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's the biggest selling game of all time, but it's got to be close, isn't it?
Well,
I know it's bundled with the console, but
sure. Yeah, I mean, Tetris is just, it's just everyone knows what Tetris is, don't they? Even people that have never probably played a game since
that's a good way
ago.
to sort of benchmark certain games, I guess, isn't it? You could say Tetris in any sort of conversation, and you're not going to find many people who don't know what you're talking about.
Nah, that was on the original Game Boy, wasn't it? I believe
it was. Yeah. What a strange game to like bundle. Like when you think of Nintendo now, like a Russian puzzle game.
Yeah.
Whoever made it definitely wasn't them. That's the game they bundled with their console.
Yeah, it was good though. I mean, the soundtrack sort of just boosted it up as well. I played it for a long time, but I spent hundreds of hours in Pokemon. Now, Pokemon was bloody massive when I first started secondary school. The card collecting, which I assume you was a little bit old for. Yeah, I missed all that, mate. Thank God. Missed all that. Yeah, I mean, I dabbled a little bit in the card collecting, but never really hooked me. But when I loved the TV show, I was really into that. But then when there was a chance to play the game, I was all in. Like Pokemon Red arrives, I think it was Christmas of 1999, comes with the Game Boy Color, and I set on my massive long quest to become the top Pokemon trainer in the land, and being able to trade and battle with your mates over the Game Link cable. That's a great little touch there. Yeah. Being able to do that. And I think the only way you could get all 151 Pokemon was to trade with someone that had like the blue version of the game. That's quite clever, really. It's a good way. So you could get doing it. 150 each, or was it less? And then you trade the last like 20 off or something. Yeah, it was some. I don't know if it was 20. There was a certain one that only appeared in certain games, but it's a great little touch there. It was easily 30 hours to do the main quest, but you could rack up so much more if you wanted to actually get all of them. Terrific RPG, and to me it was a defining handheld game for the Game Boy. And another mention has to go to Super Mario Land. So that was on the Game Boy, and that was a great achievement for a handheld title as well. And obviously it doesn't have the depth of what its console cousins had, but it's a marvellous entry into the series, and it was actually a launch title for the Game Boy, which I wasn't aware of until recently. So I didn't know that. What a stunner to have on day one, Super Mario Land. What I found strange was there's no Bowser in that, though. It was all to do with aliens nicking the princess. Do you remember playing it at all? Did you never get round to? Do you know what? I've messed about on it. I kind of missed the handheld a little bit. Yeah. I mean, someone in my house, my younger brother had one, but I've definitely never completed it. But I do remember it was all like, it looked weird, squashed, and I remember it wasn't set in like the normal universe. I don't think the second one was either. No, they went down like an alien route. It's strange, but for a handheld title, it was cracking. I think that about wraps up the best of the rest. We can make a start on the consoles. Now, main event is what some people are saying. We're in the third generation, so the big hitters in this time period are the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Master System. Now, the NES was released back in Japan, I think in 1983, I read earlier, but it didn't come to these shores till about 3 years afterwards. So 1986 is when it arrived in the How are they getting away with that? It's ridiculous. It's crazy, really, when you look back at it. It wouldn't accept that nowadays. That is not happening. The Master System arrives just under a year later, June 1987, and Nintendo seemed to have the Japan and North American market locked down, but according to the historians that are around at the time, the Master System was the dominant force in Europe and South America. Now, I had I had a Master System. I think it might have been a Master System Mark II. They actually had different models of that. but I had no access to an NES. I've never sat down and managed to play. Well, actually, that's a lie. I've played one occasionally, but a friend never had one at that time. What did you have? You had an NES? Did you have access to the Master System?
A few friends had. So it was like the big school debate standard Nintendo, Sega. You didn't know which way to go.
Right.
And I think I was more keen on the Master System. Like, as you say, it was the bigger one really here. And then a friend said, "Yeah, I'm gonna get Nintendo." Like, my sort of best friend at the time was like, "Gonna get an NES." And I was like, "Right, he knows what he's talking about." So sort of went, "Mum, NES, please." So that was on its way. And then he stitched me up and I think he got an Amiga, and sort of I was like, "Right." He goes, "Yeah, sort of got upgraded. I've got this," and I was like, "You bastard!"
Yeah.
But to be fair, I mean, probably the best thing, because the Master System, there are games I was jealous of. Even at the time, there were things I looked at on envy, because a lot of those games were ported from the arcade. So you had like Golden Axe and things like that. And I was like, right, they do look really good, but I like to think that maybe, and I think the reviews of the time back me up if I say that the NES games had a lot more depth to them. They had the adventure games and some big developers like making games on them, and franchises that have gone on 25 years, whereas
that's Nintendo. Just
don't know where Sonic's gone, mate. Really has sort of died a death.
Yeah, well, we'll leave Sonic out of this, but I mean, back then, did you feel much of a rivalry between them? I know nowadays it's torrid between Microsoft and Sony fanboys. Like, was it like that back then? Was that sort of attitude, or was it sort of a bit more relaxed? It was like, oh, I'll get one or the other, it doesn't really matter. Or was it like a fierce competition, as though, from my understanding, it heated up more in this?
No, fierce, mate. Same.
Really?
Yeah.
So even from back then, that's when it first kicked off.
I agree with you. I remember once actually being with a mate. This was a bit later in the SNES sort of era. Being in Keddies in Southend, and getting into an argument with just two random kids over Nintendo and Sega. It's ludicrous. Going like, "Oh, ours has got Mode 7 graphics," and they're going, "Yeah, we've got blast processing." It's like, what is this argument about? But yeah, and even back then, that's the thing, isn't it? You invest all that money in it, and then I feel like you just feel like you've got to defend it to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, you haven't invested the money in it, have you? Your mum's done that. Come on.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's done, isn't it? It's like that classic thing where your parents go, "Oh, are you happy with your present?" And you have to go, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And you sort of, even if you're like, you've made a massive tactical error. So
just have to go with it.
Exactly. You kind of know you're not going to, there's no chance to get the second one. You're stuck with whatever you've gone for, and you have to defend that console to the ends of the earth. So yeah, I think there's always been that big rivalry.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about the rivalry a bit more when we get onto the SNES and Mega Drive, because I remember there was adverts and all sorts going out at that time with just ridiculous statements. I remember you telling me a few stories, but let's crack on with the games now. Master System wise, I said that's what I had access to. The first one it's got to be in there is California Games. It's got to make the grade. 6 sports: skateboarding, hacky sack, surfing, roller skating, frisbee, and BMX. All bloody hard to master, but they're all quite unique in the way you had to play them. I remember the half pipe for the skateboard was impossible. I could never do that. But it was originally a C64, an Apple II game, and eventually the powerhouses at Sega and Nintendo got them ported over to the relevant consoles. But I was plying my trade on the Master System, trying to be the best all-round sportsman. And for me, I always loved the surfing. That was the one for me. It seemed a little bit easier than the other ones to work out, and I just love that sometimes when you used to bail, a little shark fin would pop up and you'd hear like the little Jaws theme kick in. So being a massive fan of Jaws, it was a cheap win for me and sort of won me over straight away. And speaking of the tunes they had on there, I'm pretty sure they stole a version of Batman for the BMX game. If they haven't stolen it, it sounds very, very similar, but it's a massive rip-off by the sounds of things. But the whole soundtrack for California Games was great. It just fits the bill for what you're doing. It had a multiplayer aspect in it, so you could take turns and get an individual score, and then there's like a winner crowned at the end of it based on your overall scores. And although I rarely use this because I hate losing, it's still a great little feature. And I imagine somewhere on this earth there's someone with like a little California Games Mates Championship trophy that they must have made back in the day that's been passed around numerous friends and that. Do you get to play this on the SNES or on the Master System at all?
Yeah, I definitely played it. It must have been on the The NES, I think, yeah, it must have been.
Sorry, NES, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
NES Master System. Sorry.
I played. I don't remember the frisbee. Weirdly, I can literally.
Stupid! Like you had to, it's like a little bar that swung back and forth like a slingshot, and you had to get it in a certain area, and that would do like the power of it, and then you take control of the person running, and you had to catch it.
So it's a bit like ultimate frisbee then.
Yeah, so the further you threw it, sort of, the more points you get. But then if it went over your head, it was hard to catch it up, and it's quite good, but.
Yeah, no, I remember it's a great little game. Hacky Sack was my favourite, I think. He had that little bird that went across, didn't he?
Yeah.
Hit him for extra points. Yeah, I remember that was a regular rental from Nobles for me. I used to enjoy that.
Yeah, even rentals these days you don't see much of. But yeah, it's the perfect rental game, wasn't it, for like a weekend or whatever, you had a mate round or sleepover or whatever you was doing. That was a great game to pick up and have.
Agreed, mate.
So you've got, on your NES, Cobra Triangle. Now, from what I've seen, I never played it. It was like an isometric racing game, wasn't it? It looked like it had loads of variety, though. I was just looking over a few levels, and it just looked crazy, really. The amount of depth it had to it for what was essentially a racing game with shooting.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this. So it's made by Rare. I think it might be their first or second game, which obviously they went on to make a ton of decent games.
Yeah.
So the quality's there even back then. Yeah, as you say, isometric racer, but also a lot of action. So you had a boat with like a side scroller shoot 'em up type upgrade system. So you would collect pods and you could then increase your speed, your guns, missiles, you name it. And then every level would be slightly different. So you might have a straight up race to the finish.
Yeah.
You might have like a rescue the hostages scenario. You'd have like enemy boats guarding like 20.
I saw that there's a rescue hostage where there's like loads of people swimming, then boats come in and pick them up. You have to shoot them before they get out.
Get them to like a safe zone. You'd have like a sport. I don't know what you'd even call it. Like there'll be ramps going over waterfalls, so it'd be like a sort of race, but like with a survival and a real short time limit. And then you'd have like a boss battle at the end of every fourth or fifth stage. So yeah, you really got your money's worth with it, and it was rock hard, like ridiculously hard. I think 16 levels rings a bell.
Yeah,
no continues, obviously, no saves, so it was just your 4 lives or whatever, and then you were binned off. But mate, it was genuinely fantastic. Like every level was fun, and it was like if you died, you just booted it up again and just got cracking.
Quite addictive then. You just
massively addictive.
Probably a bit frustrating, but it's more
it was
you wanted to
controller throwing frustrating. There's this one level I remember with the waterfalls that I mentioned, and there'll be like, so you'd have to get on speed boosts. There'd be these little whirlpools going around. If you touched them, it kind of spun you off left, right, over the waterfall to the left and right of the screen. Then you had ramps moving left and right the whole time over these like gaps. So you had about 15 things to avoid, another 11 things you had to hit. It was ridiculous. Like
sorry, go on.
Good. No, I was just going to say, like nowadays, you'd never have the patience for it. It was only back then when you've invested 40 quid in it and you're like, right, this is all I've got for the next 6 months. I'm getting through this. But you wanted to get through it as well. I'm not taking anything away from it. It was a short game, so they had to make it difficult, and they just nailed it perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, was it long? Did you ever complete it, or did you get to the end?
No, completed it, You'd love it. Last boss was a giant shark. Or was it a dragon? The shark was definitely on it. I can't remember if it was the third last or second to last. But
you had me at sharks. You don't have to mention the dragon. That's it.
Mate, shark, dragon, giant crab, they had them all.
All sorts.
Yeah, all the big ones.
So that's quite a different game to have on there, like an actiony shootery racer game.
Yeah, it was well reviewed at the time, and it genuinely is one of the ones I always like think about, and I think I've still got it, and I've gone back and played it a few times. I don't think I've ever completed it since, but it's a dead good game. I'd love it. Yeah, I'd love a little remake of that, or some sort of. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it would just be a little mess about thing, but they just don't. They never even made games like that back then. They've just never ever touched it. Really,
it's quite unique in what it is. Really,
yeah, absolutely.
I can't think of anything that could really compare to it at that stage. But cracking choice there. I've got Rampage on the Sega Master System.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is one of the ones I would definitely have been jealous of.
Yeah, so it was actually a port from an arcade. So originally Rampage was an arcade game. and that was out sort of late 80s, 86 time. But I remember having this on the Master System. I remember the copyright date on the case of the game and the cartridge being 1988, because it was the same year as my birthday. So it's strange how that date sticks with me. So that must have been the year that this was released. And you could choose from 3 monsters. You had this just George bloke who was basically King Kong. You had Lizzie, who was a play on Godzilla, and you had Ralph. And well, Ralph was a giant werewolf, so fuck knows where his inspiration came from. But you essentially got control of these beasts, and you'd smash the buildings down until they were reduced to rubble. You had the army that were trying to kill you, so you had helicopters, ground troops, tanks, and the great thing was you could destroy all these and actually pick up the troops and eat them and eat normal people. It's just fantastic. And 2D, you'd have, say, maybe 6 buildings in one screen, and you to complete that stage, you'd have to just destroy all the buildings in that area, and you'd move on to the next one. And it's like all those monster movies and that you saw or heard about as a kid, and this was a chance for you to actually go out and play it and sort of feel like you're just destroying a whole city. It was superb stuff, and it's one of the few games back then I actually managed to complete without cheating, so I don't think there was any cheats for it, so I had no choice. But I actually remember getting to the end of this one quite a few times, and it's a game that I sunk so many hours into it. There was multiplayer there as well, so you could have 2 of you, so me and you.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Was that even on the Master System then?
Yeah, you could play that.
Oh, that's
I remember
decent.
Sometimes, I think Piper come round occasionally, and we played it a few times, but you'd have 2 monsters running around on one screen, sort of smashing stuff up, and there's a little bit of competition there. You had like a score depending on how many people you ate and how many buildings you destroyed. So I guess the winner would be the person with the highest score. But one of the best things they added in the multiplayer, and it's just a small minor detail, I think this is sometimes what makes a difference, is that when your health got to 0 in a normal game, you would shrink down to a human again.
That's it, yeah.
And walk off the screen, and that was like your little thing. And then you'd respawn on a blimp and come back in and then complete the level. I think you had a set number of lives. So in single player, yeah, you drop down to 0, you drop down to a human, you shrink off, walk off screen, that's the end of it. But in multiplayer, when you fell and shrunk to a human, the other person could actually snatch you and eat you before you went off the screen. And that was like the golden ticket, wasn't it? For just being able to snatch your mate and gobbling him up. And it didn't get any better than that if you managed to pick up your mate and eat him. It just works. And it's a cracking formula, and it just unleashed that destructive nature that I think everyone has in them at some scale. But it was actually on the NES as well. And I watched a comparison video, and I'll have to say, I mean, I'm not sticking up for Sega here, but the difference in the two is so... You can notice it straight away in terms of the graphics, the sound, and also the characters. You only got 2 characters on the NES. It's really strange how that happened, because I imagine they were sort of gunning quite close together in terms of power, but I don't know how
even back then, Nintendo underpowered. It's ridiculous.
Struggling. Yes, I'll suggest you go and have a look at it. It's really strange. Getting on sort of the NES side, you've got Double Dragon 2: The Revenge.
Yeah, that's my second one.
That's your second one there.
Double Dragon, yeah. I think if you were around, like, 'cause I know, like, obviously for you it's a bit different. This was just the console that happened to be in your house, and maybe you didn't have a great deal of say over what came in. And these are, yes, but I mean, obviously similar to me, but except I was a little bit older, but there was no internet. You just kind of like pick a game and pray it's a decent one. But I think if you were around in this time, like platformers and side-scrolling beat-em-ups, they were sort of, the gold standard in games. And Double Dragon, if you're down your local arcade, that would definitely be the one you would gravitate to.
So again, was that as an arcade port? Was that sort of was that a big thing, having this into your
Double Dragon?
Console?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, and that's what I'm talking about. You kind of you wanted the games that emulated the ones that you played down the arcades, which were kind of the gold standard.
Unlimited plays, no losing your little 20p.
Exactly. And the original Double Dragon was out on the Nintendo, but it was like you said about Rampage. It only had one player, so you couldn't the game's called Double Dragon. Exactly, that's just gone, and it was completely different from the arcade. But I don't know if it was the same company that done Double Dragon 2, but they nailed it. I mean, there must have been a Double Dragon 2 arcade. I don't think this follows it in any way.
Right.
But that's fine. You know, you've got two players simultaneously, same screen. You can beat each other up if you want. So it's great for like messing about.
Did it take away your health if you punched each other?
Yeah, do that, knock them off. Like, because a lot, it would be like the is it isometric? I don't know. You know, where you can kind of walk up and down on the screen. But then there'd be some sort of like platformy bits where you were on like a 2D ledge and you could literally do a kick and kick someone straight down a hole. And so you had to be dead careful. And it was good teamwork and like real good big sprites for 8-bit. Great graphics. They were huge. 5 or 6 levels, like really good. Everyone unique. Loads of baddies. We had these end of level bosses that looked like you had, like, we used to call them Stallone and Schwarzenegger, because one had a sort of little scrunched up turnip face. He was Stallone, and then you had this big, literally like big massive rip off of Arnie. Yeah, and they used to do that, this move. I don't know if you remember. They would grab you and they would throw you backwards over their head, and that was like instant death if they were standing behind one of those big holes. So like you would be screaming at your mate to like kick you out of this hole, because you'd have like a 3 or 4 second delay until he threw you. But great levels. Like there was one that kind of went like when you change your TV from 16.9 and you go through all the things, there's like letterbox. Yeah. So one of the levels went into like a letterbox view because you was inside the back of a helicopter.
That's quite good.
Yeah, and so for some reason the helicopter door kept opening, and that would then suck you out. So again, you could time the sort of throws dead right, just to have people get sucked out. So obviously that was really good. You'd always sort of gamble and try and hit as many people as close as you could, and then run away and get out. Yeah, absolutely love that.
Sounds good. I mean, I never got the pleasure to play through a Double Dragon game properly, but by all accounts, it sounds like it'd be something right up my alley. The final game you've got on your list here, and by the way, I should mention, these games that we've been listing off are not in any particular order, are they? We're just listing off our 3 favourites.
Yeah, just 3 favourites from every gen.
As they come to us. You've got Mario or Super Mario Bros. 3 here. Yeah. So, first of all, it's number 3 in the series, and there's obviously ones that have come after this. Without getting into detail about the ones that come after this on the SNES and whatever, what was it about this one that made you choose Super Mario 3 over the others? Because, as you know, we've got the rule in place where you can only choose one from each franchise. So you spilt the beans here on the NES. This is your Mario game. Yeah, I think this is the main time. Like I said, at this sort of time, every game was a platformer or a beat 'em up. That's all they had. If it was like, if they were going to license the Terminator or the Running Man or you name it, they're like, right, what can this be? Either a platform or a beat 'em up. That's all they had. And obviously Mario's got to be, well, arguably the best platformer of all time. And Mario 3, to set the scene a little bit, came on the back of this hype train called The Wizard. It was like a movie with Fred Savage starring from the Wonder Years, and it was one long hour and a half Nintendo commercial, and at the end of it, so no internet, loads of product placement throughout. Just
everything was all the arcades they played were Nintendo arcades. They didn't even have Nintendo arcades, not ones like consoles anyway, with like Zelda on it and stuff. So you, at the end of this film, the big reveal was the new game, like Super Mario Brothers 3, which you think about that now, like that. It would be mental to have like a Hollywood film, and at the end of it they played Grand Theft Auto 6. You'd be like, right, that's mental. But so it was super hyped, and it was probably out in Japan and America a year or two before it was in Europe. Sure. And I remember getting it home, and kind of because of this is the thing, because of that, you would have hated this, because of that film, I knew where the first sort of warp whistle was, so I knew how to cheat instantly. First thing, like level 1, 2, drop behind the scenery, powered along, sort of skipped to like the 4th or 5th world. What are you getting out of that though? Missing half the game. Yeah, but when you're a kid, you just want to see the end, don't you? That's it. Don't care. Just power. Don't care about the journey, as long as you can get there. But yeah, most of the things in that, mate, are now stable, like in every single Mario that's gone ahead. So you've got the overworld map, you've got all the sort of novelty levels, giant worlds and mini worlds and all of that. You've got those Koopa kids. They're all still like reeling that out now, like 20 years later. And it's perfection, if I'm honest. They kind of semi-balls things up with the second one. I don't know if you know, but the second...
So what did they do with this? I sort of heard rumours that it wasn't up to par, up to scratch.
Yeah, so there's Mario Brothers 1. Like, you had a lot of regional differences at this time. Mario Brothers 2 in Japan looks exactly the same as Mario Brothers 1. It's just got a rejig of the levels, and it actually came out eventually on the Super Nintendo as part of the Mario All-Stars pack, and it was called Mario The Lost Levels.
Yeah.
But the guys in America, like Nintendo of America, were like, nah, like, our audience aren't going to like that. Those levels are too hard. It's too similar. So they had a chat with Japan apparently, and they went, right, well, we've got this other game you've never heard of called like Doki Doki Panic. Right. And all they done was reskinned it, put Mario instead of like a lizard or whatever. I went, there's Mario Brothers 2.
Fucking hell.
So that's like the massive black sheep of the family now. Like, you've probably not played it, have you?
No.
It plays nothing like any of the... It's not a bad game. It just does not feel like a Mario game in any way, shape or form.
No.
So Mario Brothers 3 is sort of back to the sort of standard operating system, but everything about it is 10 times better than... Mario Brothers 1. The graphics are hugely improved. The music probably hasn't changed too much today.
No, it's still good though.
Yeah, all the mechanics are there, like I said. Absolute fan favourite, like Adcock house favourite, and definitely still play that today when I'm over in Ireland.
Excellent. So that's Super Mario Bros. 3. Rounds off your little NES collection. The last one I've got on the Sega Master System is Alex the Kid in Miracle World. So probably seen as a Sega's attempt at an answer to Super Mario Bros. And the series came out in 1986 in Japan, and then it was over in these shores a year later in 1987. And the version that I actually played the one I played the most, came built into the actual Master System 2. Like, that blew my mind straight away that it was built into the console.
Yeah, they used to love to that Sega little built-in game. Yeah,
it's quality. So I had the old Master System and I had the cartridge, but for some reason I never played it as much. Maybe because it was just putting the cartridge in and I was playing other things. But eventually, somehow, sort of an upgrade appeared in the house, and this was built into it. And I had a real good go at it. And it's a platform game essentially. They had like a small bit of strategy, I guess, incorporated into it, because you had to you got money through breaking these blocks over, and you picked up like sort of cash bags. But you go to a shop, this little guy would sell you all sorts of shit in there, but you'd have to buy certain vehicles and items to get through that level, because often you'd get halfway through and realise you couldn't get over a jump without having the motorbike or something like that. So there's a small bit of strategy, knowing and sort of planning ahead that you had to do, and rather than jumping on your enemies like you would with Mario, you was using your fist to punch them. So that was like a novel way of changing it up a little bit. And to me, it always seemed to have a little bit more verticality than the Mario series. So you'd go a lot from top screen to the bottom screen rather than just sort of side scrolling. I know Mario has that in and out, but this in particular, there's loads of levels where you'll go all the way down, then you'll go sideways as well. So there's quite a lot of variety in there as well. There's a massive change between one level from another. It's very diverse. Did you play this, or did you see it? And was there any sort of jealousy on this game, or did you think, no, Mario's got this sewn up?
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it being decent. I remember the paper rock scissors mechanic. I don't know if that was the bosses or... Yeah,
so at the end of some of the levels, you'd have this weird thing that was called... what was it called? Janken Pon, I think it was called, which is rock paper scissors. And you'd when you come across the bad guy Janken's henchmen, rather than fighting them, you would challenge into a game of rock paper scissors, which is mental.
You could sort of see what they were doing somehow, couldn't you? And
yeah, so the henchmen had the same pattern every time, so it was a case of basically writing down what happened the first time, and then the next time you went through, you had to get past it. But it was very weird. It was unique, but it was very weird, and you could buy this ability, like you said, to have like a little thought bubble pop up and see what they're doing.
That's it.
Didn't really help though, because 9 times out of 10 the bastards would change their choice right at the death, like just as the music ended, you'd be left sort of stranded. So it's a bit of a cheap way, but the easier way was to just sort of write them down and take the hit each time. But I mean, you said you may have dabbled in it. Was it ever on your radar really, or was it just You know, it was just like, Sega's got that. I'm never going to be able to really.
Yeah, no, I remember it. We did have a Master System at some point, and that was definitely the built-in game. Yeah. And I remember knowing it was decent. Like, I remember the paper, rock, scissors. I do remember the vehicles. Now you say there was like a little gyrocopter or something, pedal or something.
Helicopter and a motorbike and all sorts.
Yeah, there was that. Yeah, cause there was that one. I think I just preferred Wonder Boy, which.
That was like
similar,
another one. Yeah, they went for another direction down there. Yeah, so Wonder Boy, they sort of had a go at it again the second time round. It's probably not until the Sonic series arrived that they truly challenged it. But you know, in terms of Alex the Kid in Miracle World, it had a sequel which I don't think was as good. I did play it, but I loved it. Just you breaking blocks to access new areas, and sometimes you could break blocks that would release some spirit that would come out and kill you. And I just think that it had a lot more variety than what people tend to think it as, and it went a bit unnoticed because of the juggernaut that was Super Mario Bros. At the time. I think that sort of steamrolled over it, regardless of what Sega tried to sort of market it as. But for me, it's a great game, and I had lots of fond memories trying to play through that. Don't think you could cheat in that one, so I never got to the end. I got very close to the end. I don't think I actually completed it, which is a bit of a tragedy, really. Bit unfortunate. But in terms of honourable mentions, I've only probably got one, and that's Streets of Rage, so the original, so not number 2. And I know this was ported down off of the Mega Drive, but the only version I ever played was the Mega Drive version, and I loved it. I loved playing through that, so that definitely gets an honourable mention. What about you? Have you got any, Tom?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got Wonder Boys in there, actually. Mario 1 and 2.
Yeah,
Skate or Die, which is a bit like California Games, but just skateboarding. Salamander, which is also called Life Force, I think, in the UK. Bayou Billy and Metroid.
So that about wraps up our first episode of the greatest games of all time. So we've done the third generation and our best of the rest. In 2 weeks, you're going to be able to hear our top games and honourable mentions from the 4th generation and 5th generation. So make sure you tune in for that one there. If you need to get in contact with us in the meantime, it is at Dimp Digital on the Twitter handle. The Facebook page is facebook.com/Dimp Digital, and the email is dimpdigitalmedia@gmail.com. The YouTube channel's there. Make sure you check it out and check out all the content that we're putting up on there. The podcast goes up on there, so have a look at some of the other videos if you're watching us on there now. And if you want to subscribe to us for this actual podcast, you can do it via the iTunes app or via any sort of mobile app. Podbean is where it's hosted. You can also check it out on their site too. That's it for now. Game over. It's goodbye from Tom.
See you later, mate.
And it's goodbye from me, Joe Appleyard. Thanks for your time, and ta-da. Start with your Amstrad shit, because that's sort of the oldest I think we've got on record.
Yeah.
And you've also got Ickle Works from Commodore. I don't know if you still want that in there. You can bin that if you want.
Probably spelled it wrong. It's Icicle Works.
Oh, right. You've got it like Ickle World. I was thinking, what the fuck? I couldn't find it either. I was looking for it on Wikipedia. I was like, what has he put down here? This must be really obscure.
Like little gem. No, it's just spelled wrong.
Icicle Works.
Yeah, Icicle Works.
To be fair, the way you spelt that, I sort of understand where you're coming from, but it's a lot more simple than what you've put. You've added K's in, done all sorts. You don't need all that. All right, so we'll keep that in. Icicle Works.